Good afternoon. My name is Alan Unell, and this series of videos is Healthcare Reform Advocacy. Each video seeks to identify at least one problem in our healthcare system and has an action we can all take to help make it better. Today we have two topics. First, the Federal Trade Commission is suing a large anesthesiology group for antitrust practices. Antitrust. You can read that as operating as a monopoly and then price gouging. In the reference section or the description section below, I'll have a link to the Healthcare Advocacy newsletter, which will contain a reference article in the Washington Post. The story. In 2012, U.S. Anesthesia Partners, USAP, first opened in Texas. They then spread to 9 states, growing by acquiring the largest anesthesiology firms in a city, then adding in other nearby practices, buying them up. The legal action was filed against USAP by the Federal Trade Commission and its private equity founder, Welsh, Carson, Anderson, and Stowe. The case represents one of the largest, strongest moves by regulators to address complaints that large doctor practices are being built up by financial firms and are boosting U.S. medical prices. We've seen this already in previous articles where they pull this kind of stunt with hospitals, although there they tend to bankrupt the hospital and take the money and run. Here they're just taking the money. The FTC charges that USAP was cornering the anesthesiology markets where they're located and then engaging in unlawful agreements to raise prices, raking in tens of millions of extra dollars for executives at the expense of patients and local businesses. A Washington Post story in June about ASAP's business in Colorado showed that's exactly how they operated, and it relied on some internal documentation as well. It's worth noting that USAP has issued, are you ready for this? More than $1.3 billion in dividends to shareholders. Where was I? We've mentioned before that when private equity and medicine meet, the patient is the one that suffers. And here that's certainly the case, but it will bear out in court. Today, I also want to talk about medical bankruptcy. I received a note from one of our readers who asked me to look into it as it relates to housing arrangements or homelessness. Well, here's what I found. In the United States, there are about 650,000 bankruptcies every year that are strictly related to medical debt. It is 60% of all bankruptcies. There's about 1 million or so bankruptcies a year in the U.S. Medical debt and homelessness indeed are linked. There was a study done in Seattle, Washington, that found if there was medical debt, then the length of time people were homeless was actually increased by 2 years. And that reference is, again, going to be in the news article below. Nationwide, as I mentioned, there are about 100 million people who have some sort of healthcare debt, about a third of us. Of those, 1 in 5 said the debts have forced them to change their living situation. Did you get that? There's 100 million people with healthcare debt, and of those, 20% said they had to change their living situation. That included moving in with friends or family, sometimes being homeless. This is according to a Kaiser Family Foundation study. Of course, that reference will be present. I want you to keep in mind that all this misery and homelessness goes away if we have what? Right, universal health care. Our 35 peer nations have universal health care and they have no medical bankruptcies. Hold that thought. Well, last week the Biden administration announced a major initiative to try and protect Americans from medical debt. They outlined plans to develop federal rules that would bar unpaid medical bills from affecting a patient's credit score. The regulations, if and when enacted, would potentially help tens of millions of people who have medical debt on their credit reports, eliminating that information that can depress consumers' credit scores and make it harder for some people to get a job or rent an apartment or get a car loan. These new rules would also represent one of the most significant federal actions to tackle medical debt. That's a problem. Remember, that's a problem that burdens 100 million people, 1 out of every 3 of us, and it forces tons of people to take on extra work or give up their homes, ration food, or other essentials, according to a Kaiser Family Foundation study. No one in this country should have to go into debt to get quality health care that they need, said Vice President Kamala Harris. She announced the new moves last week together with Rohit Chopra, who's head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB. The agency has been charged with developing these new rules. These measures will improve the credit scores of millions of Americans so they'll be able to invest in their future, the Vice President said. Enacting new regulations is a lengthy process. The administration warned everybody that it's going to take until next year to get this done, but at least it's a step. Credit reporting, by the way, is a threat that's designed to induce patients to pay their bills, and it's one of the most common collection tactics used by hospitals. There is also growing evidence that credit scores depressed by medical debt, of course we mentioned this, can threaten people's access to housing and fuel homelessness in many communities. It's certainly true in my community in Vancouver, Washington, where the number of homeless people who are of retirement age has blossomed in the last couple of years. It is not good. Many groups have urged the federal government to bar tax-exempt hospitals from selling patient debt or denying medical care to people with past due bills. These are practices that remain widespread across the U.S. And let me tell you something. This can be done by changing IRS regulations, because the regulations in place that grant tax-exempt status to a hospital are so weak, they don't have to help any patients, and they can still maintain tax-exempt status. So it's time we put some teeth in that. Okay, there's an action. Here's what the action is. And it's again going to be in the description below. We can let the Biden administration know this is a step in the right direction, but it's just a step. Universal health care wipes out medical bankruptcy and the attendant problem of being forced into the street because you were sick. You can call or email President Biden and or Vice President Harris and let them know. There's a comment form that is, I'll make sure that that link is in the description, or you can call them. Their number is 202-456-1111. Or if you have a cell phone, you can use ResistBot and your messaging app to text to 50409, sign, S-I-G-N, PQKZOA, and you'll send a similar message, which will also be in the description field, essentially telling them, thanks for helping on the credit rules with medical debt. How about getting universal health care going so we don't have this issue? And by the way, take care of that tax-exempt status on hospitals that aren't helping people. Okay, that's it for today. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll put a link into Healthcare Advocacy, our daily emailed newsletter, in the comment field below, and subscribe away. Okay, have a good day, everybody. Talk to you tomorrow.